This is Devon County Council's Live Lab. We are undertaking this with Milestone and the University of Exeter. And our project is based around the A382, which is a section of strategic highway in Devon, stretching from the A38, which is National Highways, into Newton Abbot, which is one of the larger towns in Devon. The entire scheme is split into two sections. We've got roughly 2.5 kilometres from the A38 down towards Newton Abbot. Bit of a gap where we built a previous phase of it, and then a short section just under 0.5 kilometre, which is a new link road, and that bypasses a particularly constrained section where it's very congested. It includes 3 roundabouts. We've got a new bridge, culverts, some fairly significant earthworks in there as well. And all of that comes in with a carbon footprint of 10,279 tonnes. So it's quite a significant amount. And the aim really is to look at how we can get that to negative. It's where we know the industry needs to be. And it's basically kind of looking at all elements of this, whether it's materials, the design, or any processes that are involved to get us to the point where we're absorbing more carbon on the scheme than we are emitting. And this is hopefully going to be a template for projects in the future. So the approach we've taken to get to this point is, first of all, entering into an ECI arrangement with Milestone. This happened in 2022, before the Live Labs came along, and the basis of that was getting Milestone to kind of help us with the deliverability of the project, but also with a focus on carbon. So we knew historically as a county that we need to look at and address our carbon in infrastructure in particular, and this was kind of looking at it from the point of view of a large-scale project. So that's been there right from the start. Happily, it coincided with the launch of Live Labs, and so we've put in this bid and obviously been successful. So the project was in the design stage at that point, which gave the greater potential for change. We've got an integrated project team, and it means that we've got operational and design teams working closely together to achieve these changes. But we've also held workshops where we've had input from University in terms of carbon and identifying hotspots, and also from the kind of planning side within Milestone to kind of say, well, actually, yeah, this is how we deliver it, but have you thought about all these processes that go into the whole as well? Which makes it, it's been a real eye-opener really, and a good way to address this. And it's kind of raised some issues and made us make changes that have been quite significant for the team. We've also held an innovation day together where we've encouraged kind of local producers to come forward with ideas. But overall, it's been having the freedom to be able to make these changes that Devon have given us that means that we've been able to get as far as we can with it so far. And it's been a complete change in approach. So we've kind of taken a much more holistic view of the scheme, looking at what's in the local environment, what we can use to our benefit, and where there are resources that we can be reusing. So, looking at the picture we've got there, bottom right corner, that's a quarry that is going to come to the end of its life, needs to be refilled. So, and we've got surplus material. So it kind of, just little things like that, looking a bit more locally, you can make some big changes. But what it's done in looking at it like this has meant that we've developed kind of a load of interlinking strategies, and that's what Nicole is going to bring on to next.
Yeah, thanks, Beth. So I'm going to talk through a couple of slides, similar infographics and strategies as this. So first being our education and clearance strategy. Someone has asked in the previous group actually what sort of motivation was around. I probably didn't put enough access on it. Beth just spoke about us sort of thinking about things differently, and what we really wanted to do here when we came up to this sort of idea, and again, it was just an idea and a concept 18 months, 2 years ago, was how we could do things differently in terms of putting the value on the resources in terms of basically it was already on site. and we didn't want to send a load of timber up as waste from projects. So sort of the further step in this, so this is a little bit of a hierarchy in terms of our decision making, what we'd be using batteries for. So we've got one of our translocated trees on the table there. So this time last year, if you've seen this graphic before, this time last year was just completed our tree translocation process. So we've moved 2,000 plants, individual plants and trees, was all from the construction area. As unfortunately had to be cleared. But prior to the clearings, we'd looked at the different specimens of trees which were able to be translocated, moved them to a temporary nursery which is in a field adjacent to the A382, so it's literally adjacent to the project. We worked out that those individual trees, no tree is no further than half a mile up or down the road, to be in that nursery. So this is the second, just coming on to the second spring, and they're coming into bud now, and we're hoping for a reduced failure rate on those compared to traditional planting. So secondly to that, it sort of occurred to us that we were going to be procuring timber elements such as fencing, signposts, both the hempfreeds, like during the construction process, even things like you spitting out boards, profile boards, setting out pegs, things like that, that we would be procuring from across Europe or the UK. And when we had that, that's what potentially kind of didn't realise how good it would be, that we've got this timber on our doorstep. So we procured a little sawmill, which we're going to be, so they're 12 miles away, and they're in the process, or already have actually produced some of those timber products for us that we use within constructions. Full transparency with the stage 3 hasn't yet happened. So if I move on to stage 4, so anything that we're unable to use, in terms of that sawmilling process, the excess will be, most of it has been already chipped, and is going to be converted into biochar. So we actually had a mobile pyrolysis plus mobilized to site last week. It's been, again, a year, 18 months in the process, and not without its challenges, but that is now on our site, undergoing pyrolysis as we speak and turning into biochar. Not got enough time to fully talk as much as I'd like to about biochar, but in summary, so that long cone store of carbon that is trapped in biochar, which is in the tinies there, feel free to have a look after. And we're going to use back in the project. So again, there's a circular sort of approach within the project boundary, and we're going to use it back as a tree plant as a subsource. So multiple benefits there. And second strategy is all about soils. So we appreciated and sort of recognised, again, maybe a year or so ago, the carbon that is stored within the soils on the project, it would ultimately potentially be released during the earthworks phase of construction, was not accounted for, and she doesn't usually get accounted for in terms of carbon baseline footprint assessments for construction projects such as this. And so that's hopefully what we're aiming to understand as part of this soil strategy, which we're hoping to get started over the next month or two. So we want to know what happens to the soil carbon when it's excavated, when it's stored in stockpiles for long periods of time, 6 to 12 months or longer. And also for us, because we plan to incorporate biochar into it, what is the benefit of that long term as well? So that's what we'll monitor as part of it, and ultimately how that improves, hopefully, and the vegetation establishments and therefore seed frustrations of the trees that get incorporated into our final landscaping. Last slide on some of the infographics and strategies. So our pavement strategy, we've also got a bit more information about that on the table as well. What we've been able to do during the ECI stage of the project is to design out as much carbon as possible. So particularly points 1 and 3, 4 on here, all about WIP production. So going from a 10-metre wide carriageway to an 8.3-metre wide carriageway, but still achieving the benefits in terms of road safety and intra-city congestion. And also being able to have the alignment with the shared use path on top of the existing road, so reducing the road construction that we're having to do from scratch. Pavement materials, so again, the last 2 years has been a big research exercise in terms of understanding the tomatoes out there on the market in terms of the lowest or the most carbon negative materials and how we can make asphalt carbon negative. And so that's something that we'll be hoping to cure, and as we go into construction in the next few months, hopefully realise that on site as well. And finally, traffic management. So a big traffic management modelling exercise was done in terms of understanding how or what the most effective way or efficient way of dealing with traffic management and the travelling public while we construct projects. So ultimately, some into the conclusions that Fly ID able to close the road, reduce the overall programme. And if we go on to the next slide, just links into one of the key lessons learned in terms of at this early stage, understanding the co-benefits of decisions like that. And so within the traffic management strategy itself, overall then being able to reduce the programme, having a knock-on impacts and to which how long we're mobilised on site and do the compound running, pipe running, etc. I see a couple of other learnings that we've had so far. So mainly going to talk about vegetation strategy again in this, but because we've done that, that's what we've already completed. We've gone through the lessons learned process in terms of tree translocation. A few potentially obvious ones on there, but key takeaways really. Making sure the allowance, both in terms of cost and availability of land and location for a temporary tree nursery is really key in that. We've obviously sought and had specialists involved in terms of the translocation themselves. So each individual specimen and tree has been chosen based on its ability to undertake that translocation process. Again, co-benefits in terms of translocation, in terms of public perception and ecological mitigation. So the sawmills, you would have seen potentially some background video that we had running earlier. I mentioned as well that that's only 12 miles away from the project. So in terms of procurement that exercise Devon undertook, we were really looking at trying to minimise the carbon associated with the sawmill operation and any for that I've mentioned. It seemed crazy to us that some of the timber that we would be procuring was coming from Eastern Europe, and so location was key to that one as well. Biochar. So we've learned a lot about biochar over the last 2 years again, particularly in the last couple of months as we've been nearing towards mobilisations. I admit, wood chip was the wood chip prior to 6 months ago, and various different sizes of chip produce better biochar, ultimately depending on the end use. But a key thing for us as well in terms of quality of biochar was how much fine and dust are within that wood chip, and that ultimately comes down to how the grading and how basically has charts laid out in that within that chipping process. And then last one on here, the behavioural change app. So he commissioned a pilot trial of a behaviour change gamification programs, which we've had a sort of big effort and our construction team, your design team, more engaged with. Unfortunately, I suppose one of the big lessons learned from that aspect of it was we'd initially attempted to have that ready for the mobilisation and in early works of the construction phase. As I said, that's been slightly delayed, and we ran with the pilot schemes before we got the construction and before we had a fully embedded team, I suppose, wider on the 4 or 5 of us here today. And so despite some carbon benefits, we think if we were to do that again, that is something that we would change.
So looking at, obviously we've looked at the lessons learned, the challenges that we've also come up against. One of the big ones really in terms of getting to carbon negative has been the decisions that were made through the project's history. And this project dates back nearly 10 years and it's been through planning and it's had various decisions approved through that time, but actually from the point of view of reaching carbon negative, some of those have been a bit problematic for the changes that we'd like to make. I think most live labs have found that there's a lack of, or just general problems with reliability in terms of the carbon data that's out there. We're no exception to that. So it's been a tricky one to navigate. Another one that we've come up against is the commercial interest during the tender process on a big project like this. Contractors will play their cards close to their chest until they know that they've got a bit of a shoe in, really. Trying to work our way through that has been problematic. Also, you can see from the graphics that we've got here, there's only so far we can go with design, but we can make some fairly significant reductions. But there is still a residue, and there's not a lot coming through in the market at the moment that is offering really significant reductions. So there's still the question as to how this does become business as usual for future projects when the market isn't quite there in terms of materials and what they're offering. And undoubtedly the biggest challenge for us has been the funding of the overall scheme. Unfortunately, it's all been tied up with the general election and spending review. So although we are absolutely chomping to get onto site, the funding isn't quite there yet in order for us to be able to do that. So at the moment, we're kind of very much theoretical, but definitely hoping to get there soon. And so that's the aim with the coming year, that we will finally get onto site. We're all there ready, can hit the ground running and spend an awful lot of money fairly quickly. So that's good news and one of the benefits of such a big project. We'll also see the first results of the soil carbon tests, and also be able to start looking more earnestly at the material selection and getting that implemented on site. And in terms of how this is changing how Devon do things on other schemes, the procurement lessons that we've learned have been taken forward into our new minor works framework. So it's kind of, when we're talking to suppliers there, making sure we're not falling into the same traps that we fell into when we were looking at the sawmill. The biochar trial, as Nicole said, is on site, but the good news is that we were able to get both our corporate and our waste colleagues out for them to look at it and look at how we implement this wider in terms of Devon's overall corporate carbon issues, and also how we're dealing with the waste that Devon produces as well. So there's further conversations to be had there. And then, as I said, we've got the funding issues. We've had to prepare a revised business case for the DFT, but one of the integral parts of that has been live labs and carbon reduction. And actually it's kind of highlighted that this is a key thing in terms of perhaps how we approach major projects like this in the future, and making carbon much more of a kind of highlight item in terms of the consideration of that. So that concludes our presentation.